this microphone should go with you guys.
We need one microphone out there, or she has it.
Then I can share.
Yeah,
Oh,
so,
this needs to go down.
yeah, I can use that. To begin, I really liked all four of those talks, and taking the society's pulse is something that's really analogous to something I always talk about when I talk about spatial analysis and cartography and mapping, which is giving the world an MRI, and it's the same sort of medical analogy. And I always say, oh, the MRI is the diagnostic tool, one of the diagnostic tools that we have in medicine to help us sort of provoke spatial reasoning about something going on in a person's body. And I think a lot of the projects here, whether it's Jeff's project with the Out of Eden walk or Ben and Todd's tweet map, trying to provide a reasoning artifact to help us understand what's going on the planet. Whether it's about people, whether it's about climate, that's really what contemporary sort of spatial analysis is trying to do in some way. And I really liked how Chris tied that in at the end. So at this point, I'd like to ask you guys if you have a question in particular before, yeah, go ahead, Peter. Here.
Okay, I'll use this. So one of the things, and we were planning this conference, and Kevin came up, and we sort of, some of our colleagues from the law school asked this question. So what makes geospatial different? And they doubted, I think, that there was anything new to be said or different about this. But it occurred to me, Jeff, when you took TweetMap, there was something very different. I can follow somebody on TweetMap, or I can follow somebody on Twitter. But what you did was to say, I'm not following anybody. I'm finding out who's there in my neighborhood and what they're saying. So it seems to me that changes the relationship in a way that where we didn't have that relationship before. Something really has changed there. I don't know if Chris would like to comment on whether he sees that as a change as well. But it strikes me that becomes invasive in a new way.
And that was exactly my point, is to show that this can be an extremely invasive thing. I did it. I'm doing it out of curiosity. And literally, just like Google Earth, you can while away the day looking at what people tweet. You can use it for all kinds of reasons. You can use it to get a pulse on where you're going. I'm going to this certain spot in Illinois for a conference or something, and I want to see sort of what people are tweeting around there. It takes Twitter and doesn't force you into following a certain user. You can go and search and look and follow whoever you want. I'm assuming you have something to add.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if anything useful to add, but yeah, I mean, I think there's. I'll play the generational card, right? I mean, if it's new to you, it seems invasive. If it is the thing you grow up with, it's like the air and the water, right? I mean, it's a fact of life, and you learn to navigate it. So, I think, yeah, as these things pop up, I looked at Twitter. I stayed the hell away from Twitter for a long time until I had an organizational reason to just do organizational stuff on Twitter. But still, as a person, it scares the hell out of me. And I would never touch it with a 10-foot pole except for that.
Let me ask you this, and this is some point I'm going to bring up tomorrow, but it's yeah. Perfect with Jeff's slide here, which I think is very striking in its simplicity. And do you guys believe this person knows that somebody can make that map?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think if you ask them, do you know that your tweets are geolocated? They'd go, yeah, my iPhone asked me, will I enable that? Yeah. And okay, yeah, sure. But if you said, did you realize that your neighbor can go to tweetmap. Whatever it is and watch you as a voyeur and right. Watch everything you've done and where you did it and while you were driving and when you're at your girlfriend's house, even though you're married, and it's like, holy, what's going on? Yeah. And so it's all how you pose the question. And so what I always talk about is, we've kind of happened into becoming a location-aware society. And in the 1990s, right, we weren't. There was no GPS in phones until the FCC mandated the E911 requirement in 2003. That started showing up. We didn't even get apps really until the iPhone popped up in what, 2007, right? So suddenly we've lurched into this new situation where crap like that happens.
Yeah.
And nobody, to Kevin's point, right, nobody's thought about the policy implications of this. Nobody's thought through the legal issues. Whether it's at home or abroad or part of foreign policy or part of domestic, whatever, period. And so we've lurched into a situation where now you can zoom in everybody's house on Google Earth for free. We've got largely ubiquitous commercial imagery that's really high resolution. And, you know, everybody's cell phone activity and smartphone activity is leaking like a sieve out onto the public web and sliceable and diceable in space and time. So, no, I don't think generally people go, yeah, I can be completely monitored through space and time.
Follow-up
but they
question
can't.
naturally is, if people knew that this map was possible and all the things that you sensationalized that concept with, would they shut that off? Would they shut off, because you have to opt into this spatially, I'm on Twitter, you don't have, by default, my tweets are not spatially enabled, right?
I think there'd probably be a big damn button on the front of your iPhone that said, don't track me.
Yeah, of course.
With Twitter, I was meeting with some Twitter engineers the other day because we're getting.
Hit the mic.
I was meeting with some Twitter engineers at MIT the other day, and because they're going to give us the fire hose, which means all tweets. So this is just like 2%, but we'll have 100%. And then they saw this map, and they were like, "Oh my God, like we haven't even been able to visualize these tweets." And they're like, "How do we get more people to enable geolocation?" They're like, the advertising, you know, data here. I mean, they started like going crazy over this.
Well, you can take a page from the Harvard, former Harvard student, Zuckerberg, and just sort of have
Oh, Facebook, yeah,
yeah,
they
just,
were
just sort of
did it
do it.
sketchily.
And people are addicted to the technology, and
They'll just, I would say 4/5 of people probably wouldn't care to know that they're, I mean, sadly or not, I would guess a lot of
yeah,
people.
to me, that's one of the key issues here
Want
is
to amplify themselves on-
people are kind of ignorant about the technology in general. And one of the things we're going to talk about, the map yourself, the exercise tomorrow that I had my students do with Jeff and Peter, is that one of the things I wanted to show them is with that kind of data that the cell phone companies possess, with that kind of data that the credit monitors possess, you can do a lot of things. And I don't think people have that aha moment until somebody shows them themselves. As Jeff demonstrated, when you get something like that, you want to go look at yourself in this new mirror.
I wanted to go pay the kitten a visit. I mean, I wanted to go.
Go give them a kitten. That would be the creepiest thing. If you gave them a kitten, that would be the creepiest thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think most people in the room, I looked at this map and I thought it was incredible. And I think the work that you did, I think the analogy you made about the first thing when you saw Google Earth is you wanted to see your house, and the first thing when you saw a Twitter map, you wanted to see your neighbor and what they were twitting. And that's a perfect example, and I will be trying to do that as soon as it's possible to find out what my neighbor's doing. Although my neighbors probably aren't on Twitter, maybe they're kids or something. But so what I look at this, and from a privacy standpoint, part of me says, wow, that's really invasive. I think that's the term that we used. And part of me says, I could have just followed him anyways and I would have gotten that same information, right? I mean, assuming that this isn't something that he's blocked or streamed and things. And it reminds me of a study that was done a while back about some folks who found a woman who was taking the pictures maybe in Central Park, and then they went back and they went on one of the photo sharing sites and they geolocated and they found out who took her pictures, and then they went on the internet and then they found out where she lived, and then they found out where she went to school and all this stuff, and it caused a lot of media sensation, but they could have just followed her home, right? I mean, it's this part of location privacy that I think is really interesting, because I agree with that is really challenging from a legal and policy standpoint as to if you think about the terms and conditions and what consent you need to get from someone to disclose this information. But then part of me wonders, okay, they're giving this information out. It's almost like they're in the park taking the picture. If you want to follow them, they can. Where do we draw the line from a privacy standpoint, and what duty do companies and Twitter wants to get more information? What duty do you have to get someone to protect themselves against themselves?
And I mean, that's where I think the term, channel separation, channel consolidation really matters. Because, Twitter, I'll just take myself as an example, I use Twitter for very specific business reasons to get attention for those things, right? To get as many eyeballs, get as much followers and stuff like that. If I'm a 13-year-old girl, maybe I'm trying to get attention around what I'm doing as a 13-year-old girl. That's great. There's other things you do in your life not seeking attention, right? You don't engage in various financial transactions with the hope that I'm going to get attention for this. And you don't file public records with the hope that you're going to get attention for that. And but you have to do those as a course of life, right? You have to buy things, you have to file public records, you have to do those to live on earth from death to birth. And so are we saying that if you ever seek attention in any channel, right, you are now legally obligated to have all other activity that was not attention seeking be merged into your entire space-time travel path through life in such a way that everyone can see everything you've ever done? And I think we're saying no to that, but computationally and data spillage-wise, once that cell phone data, once I've turned on my Twitter location feed, right, I basically handed the heartbeat of my phone, which, as we've seen from all the studies, shows you not only where you've been every second of the day, but is over 95% predictable of where you will be on a 7-day cycle.
But to play the devil's advocate, if you're going to suggest that putting information like a tweet on a map rises to the level of what you're talking about, then I think you get into a situation like we're finding in states around or localities around the community where people are trying to restrict mapping of public information because that putting public information on a map, combining the two, somehow makes things worse. And then you're wondering, where do you draw the line?
I mean, it is a where do you draw the line sort of thing. But, again, the terms and conditions on that app, all it says is, are you willing to share the data from the location data with this app? And you say yes. Never does it say, are you going to share all of your location information that can be merged to all of your public information? There's just no education, no awareness, no nothing, and you're handing these things out to 15-year-olds and everybody else. Not to knock on 15-year-olds. I mean, I think
We've all been there. We've all been 15. Just building on that, I love that analogy of somebody following somebody else in physical space, because there are actually protections. I can't start following you every day and recording your movements with a GPS because you would detect that and probably call somebody to stop me from doing that.
How about, I got a word for you, Jeff, digital dumpster diving.
Yep.
That's basically...
Yeah, but that's something I want to talk about tomorrow probably.
Yeah. So I have a comment and then a question. The comment is I was at a meeting, a conference of lawyers and investors about opportunities in big data. And there were a lot of discussions about, well, what is the value? And one of the things that came out was, well, hardware is cheap. We just put it up on Amazon. And really, most of this work we do with open source software easily available. And so they really started honing in on this idea that, whoever has an interesting idea for juxtaposing large data sets, that's where, the investment opportunities are. And I asked the question, isn't there something to the legal risk or the intellectual property or privacy issues of actually having access to those data sets? And there was a large collective yawn. So people, deeply involved in both the legal and investment opportunities there just don't see it as any issue, you know, if you have an idea for getting a hold of this data and finding out whatever you want to learn about it, you know, you're there. So it's already done in many ways. We're sort of chasing the horses down by the pasture.
About risk mitigation.
Yeah. The question is, you know, you asked what is geospatial about this, and we tend to focus on the, you know, well, we can go right there. But I'd be interested in thoughts about the sort of new frontiers of what is essentially redlining. You know, we have the capability of not just saying, well, it's this zip code or that country, but of creating whole new geographies of which we're not aware. You know, well, sorry, you know, you can't buy this or possess this because you're in this cluster that we've determined that you didn't know anything about.
Yeah. Yeah, the most sort of malicious version of that is a concept called geoslavery that I don't know if, I always remind my students that we're not all Americans in the world. Some of the students need that reminder. There are governments who, with this same technology, would be looking at these tweets with very different intent than Jeff. And I say that is scary. And I know this is a law-oriented conference, but there are different nations, obviously with different laws. Who was tweeting about Tahrir Square would be the sensational one, right? Who was saying, oh, that was fun last night at Tahrir Square. Let's go find that person. And that is provocative. And then geoslavery is this idea that has several different names, but you fence off people and you make these geographies that you're referring to, and it is trivial, as Chris would point out, just like with the basic spatial join function. You can build these fences and divide the population in all kinds of ways. That's interesting.
Can I having lived in the Middle East, I've lived in Syria and Egypt for a few years. This is something that actually really, really, really worries me. Not that this data is not out there, not that tweets are not public, but what you don't want to do is hand dictators this kind of data on a silver platter, which a platform like this could do, and it's something I'm very cognizant of. I mean, we've talked about blacking out certain areas of the world, at least only allowing heat maps and not points.
Yeah.
And as the system gets more capable, it's going to be even more scary. I mean, I'm implementing spatial joins now where you can do point, pick all your protests, pick all points within 500-meter radius within 1 hour of that,
Yeah.
and cull those users. I mean, you know, you can't stop the development of technology. That's another thing about open sourcing this, which makes me nervous, in the sense that there was this Wall Street Journal article about companies basically dealing with shady regimes like North Korea or Iran and selling them technology, data mining technology, and tracking technology, which this might fall under at some point. At least I would never do that consciously, you know. But it scares me. Like, what if I open source this, which I'm planning to do, and it's used? I can no longer control how it's used. Yeah, it really bothers me.
I think I was going to ask Ben and you that exact question. Is when I'm watching the boat go through the shipping channels.
Yeah.
My mind goes straight to evil things, and I don't know.
People drive up and down the interstate.
Yeah,
it's great fun.
It's innocuous to watch people.
Yeah.
If I'm watching people cross borders, then all of a sudden it's different.
And it can be used for a lot of good, like this flu tracking thing. You know, there's a lot of things. This may or may not be good. I'm going to put up an election data set, all election giving from 1980. It has zip +4, which is within a few hundred meters. I don't know if that's good, but at least it's public information that the government wants to be public.
Yeah. Well, somebody's going to do it.
Yeah. So.
We have time for one more question. I'm gonna make it from you. So Giovanni, can you make sure there's a microphone over here?
I have a question for Jeff. It's a very phenomenal walk from African to the South American. But do you think of the problem Jonathan has mentioned is a global trip or global internet, but local government have different roles to enter, right? As far as I know, in China, actually the twin has been blocked. If you work in China, how do you solve this problem? Another thing might be the accessibility to internet or the power. Have you ever think about these problems during post-walk?
Yeah, so Paul has sort of carefully considered all the different possible countries he's going to walk through. China is about 3.5 years into it, I think. And I think what he's finding is that it's sort of something you have to deal with maybe 6 months in advance and start the visa application process and do this sort of legwork. And so that's why he has these specific spots where he'll actually stay for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, where he knows he has an internet connection, he can set up the next part of the walk, and every government of the country that he's walking through knows that he's coming in their country to walk. And so when he talks about his own security and he doesn't want to broadcast where he is, he also says, you know, the bad guys are going to be able to find me. There's leaks in the government, there's ways to find out, regardless of what is going on the website, if there's a time lag or whatever it is. He says if they really want to find me, they'll be able to do that. And so that's sort of something, you know, that's a risk that he's aware of and willing to take throughout this. But communication with lots of government officials is a big part of this. And he has a team of 5 or 6, you know, in the US and the UK that are specifically devoted for that, and then he does a lot of it himself. He goes to the embassies, calls them, gets the proper paperwork, gets the proper visas, and then he might have to take side trips to do that, and then he goes back to where the walk left off and continues walking. Or in some cases takes a boat, because you can't walk everywhere.
Thanks. Be sure to follow up if you have any additional questions with them during the reception. But thank them again, and we'll conclude our session.